so someone that's really close to me was in law enforcement for about 20 years and retired, and kind of retired early, but went into other work, and now is very much an alcoholic, and I think probably PTSD, and has just been struggling for a long time. Just basically, when I have conversations, it's just when there is sobriety there, which is rare, it's usually, a bunch of jumbled information, but is that, they've seen bad things and they've been involved in things that they, wish they hadn't, that kind of thing.
Right.
And without any details, but, and they were undercover, and I had the sense that maybe they had to get involved in things they maybe shouldn't have, or something like that. So, anyway, so that's basically it. I'm just trying. They
just
are
want to know
at
how
a
to
point
help
where,
her.
yeah, I want to know how to. It's a him, and I want to know how to help, and they're very concerned about their reputation. So when it comes to getting help with alcohol and things like that, even though they desperately need it, they're thinking of that too. And so anyway,
Jim, what would you say?
Well, some great stuff. I mean, it's hard, I think, sometimes when we get this far downstream on things. It's easier when I've got a new officer who comes into the job, and I can kind of give them some precautions, some cautionary tales that will help them to navigate bad situations so they don't find themselves at this point downstream. It's much harder after you get into patterns of abuse. And so, although I could offer you certain things about law enforcement, Bobby, I think that this is my experience has been that this is no different than alcoholism in any other context. I mean, we all will find something that drives us to the point where we want to either numb the consequences of this or not think about it, or we find ourselves in some addictive, or maybe that's the way we're wired to begin with, so we're prone to this kind of addiction. And it just so happens you happen to be in law enforcement. I do see a lot of it in law enforcement, but I don't know that it's really any different than if I was an alcoholic who wasn't a cop. And especially the way out. The way out is probably the same. So I'm going to defer to you on some of that, Bobby, but I will say this. It's going to be important. Cops don't trust anybody. And the danger you have as a police officer is, after a number of years, is you have a us versus them mentality. And it's not a racism issue necessarily. It's just because you might be in a part of the world where your city is not, as racially diverse to begin with. And so you're not even working in a context where that's the issue. But what happens is you only get called to bad stuff over and over and over and over again. If you're working undercover, you're only working with bad people. That's kind of the target. And so you don't have any deal. If you're a fireman, you're going to see all kinds of people, good and bad, regular folks that look, down the street, and folks who are on the other side of the law. But when you're in law enforcement, you're not getting that kind of balance. And so after a while, you're like getting tired of constantly dealing with the stuff that nobody else wants to deal with. And they'll just call you, and they want you to deal with it. They don't want to deal with it. Even in their own family, they don't want to deal with it. So they'll call you, and you have to deal with their own family members. And at a certain point, it does wear you down. And that's probably what's happened to him, right? It wears you down. And so you start to become skeptical of anyone who hasn't seen what you've seen. So you're not listening anymore. And so you might come in and you might know this person, Gail, and you might think, I've got a lot I could offer. I could help you out. But to be honest, Gail, if you haven't seen everything I've seen, you don't know what I'm talking about. And so I'm not going to really spend a lot of time listening to people or taking advice from people who haven't been there. And that's why I would say one of the great things about working with cops is you need another cop who has kind of been through this, knows what he's talking about, knows what he's seen, and can show him a way forward. Because the best intentions of a spouse or of children, my dad was a drinker, and he sobered up when I was 17. And he had hit the rock bottom, and he had been on the job by that time 17 years because I was born in his academy. And he bottomed out, and he said it was because I shamed him, because we weren't raised together. So I went over to his house, and he was drunk, and he was living by himself, and I made him dinner. And the fact that his 17-year-old son had to make him dinner was what drove him to rehab.
Wow.
And so, but I didn't know anything about law enforcement. But now, all these years later, we can have long conversations because I know where he's been. And now my son knows where I've been. So I think in the end, if I give you one piece of advice, is to find somebody who can help you, who's been through what he's been through. Because cops are so distrusting that will give you at least a way to begin a conversation. And then that conversation, by the way, is going to sound much like what you might offer, Bobby, because you've been through the other part of this, and that part's the same. But it's just that the cop does not trust the non-cop to tell him the truth.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just need that guy who's been through the same experience. It's sad, but that's just the reality of it.
You know, and Gail, this question, it's not an abnormal one here, even on Pastor's perspective, where people who have a heart for those that are addicts and alcoholics and they want to help. And so I would want to say, as a recovering alcoholic, I'm thankful that people have a heart to help people to recover. I would say on the deeper side that is sad is you have to come to a place in your own life where you believe that life can be better without alcohol than with alcohol. And sometimes people are just in a place where life is so cynical, so painful, so dark, and it hurts so much that if they don't have a relationship with Christ, then they have a relationship with the bottle. If they do have a relationship with Christ, it could be just God's not coming through fast enough. He's not answering. They're confused. They're going through a crisis of faith. They're going through something in their life that they're turning to alcohol for comfort. At the end of the day, alcohol is not the issue. It's a matter of our belief. It's a matter of our heart, and that has to get treated. Otherwise, the alcoholism will never go away. So what lies am I believing about God that's causing me to drink? Why am I not trusting that he has a better pathway for me? And that's tough stuff. And so sometimes, you know, you stand by, and this is a situation. Now take the call we just talked about a little bit ago, where like, okay, there's a term here, right? 9 months, we got to speak up. Sometimes with the alcoholic, you actually have to let him experience some consequences. So I do think there can be a loving word to say where they know where you stand, but after you speak it, you don't want to control the situation or they'll resent it. And you know what? An alcoholic loves the opportunity to have an excuse to drink. And if the alcoholic feels like they're getting controlled, they'll just use that as another excuse to drink. So you want to be very careful in that.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's a good word. And again, it's all about trusted authority, right?
Yeah.
We listen to people who we trust. And so it's about finding, you know, that's why ministries that reach out to certain groups are usually led by people who have been through that same journey.
Yeah.
And so they are able to understand, and they become a trusted authority for the people they're leading. So there's probably in your area, there's going to be somebody there, Gail, who's got a ministry to police officers that you could probably find that would be a great point of first contact.
You know, that last thing, Brian, that I shared, that is, that's part of the misery of being an alcoholic. I showed up at all my classes today. I deserve a drink. You know, I got a bad grade on a test. I should go drink just to kind of deal with the pain. I got an A on the test. I deserve to drink.
Celebrate, yeah.
So it's kind of like you get in this crazy relationship where with alcohol that no matter what happens in life, you're always creating an excuse to give yourself permission to stay addicted.
Wow.
And it gets really difficult to recognize that when you're in the midst of it.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah, and what you told Gail was, her friend could use the excuse, you know, if Gail comes to him saying, hey, you need help, he can use that as an excuse to, get away from me. I'm going to go have another drink.
Yeah, that's a good observation.